All right, welcome everyone. As you can see, we have people putting in the chat whose land they're calling in from, as well as what watershed you're calling in from. And there's links in the chat if you don't know to find out where you're calling in from. So definitely reference that and then let us know. So welcome to Healthy Watersheds, Healthy People. I'm so glad you guys are all here today, and I hope you guys have been having a great time at Ecumenical Advocacy Days and that you decided to come to this workshop of all other workshops that are happening right now. So full disclosure, our guest speaker, who I had originally planned to be here, is not here, but someone even better is. So please welcome Jacob Johns as our hey Jacob, as I'll pin our screens maybe, as our guest speaker for today to talk about healthy watersheds, healthy people, and access to clean water. So just to preface, I am going to go ahead and give a little bit of background to why is this work important, and what can we do to be allies in the and co-conspirators in the fight for clean water. So today we're going to discuss the gift of and human right of water. Before we get started, I said this already, but just for the people who just hopped in, please go ahead and put where you are zooming in from in the chat. And my name is Annika Harley, and I am the Program and Policy Associate with Creation Justice Ministries. I'm zooming in from DC, which is the Piscataway land, and the Anacostia watershed. Creation Justice Ministries works ecumenically to protect and restore God's creation through education and advocacy. So today we're here to talk about water access. And first, let's start with what is a watershed? A watershed is a region of land that drains to a particular body of water, such as a river or lake. Rain or snow that falls anywhere on a watershed eventually flows into that water body. It may travel over land as surface water or flow underground as groundwater. Things like industry, infrastructure, human activity, and natural disasters impact the quality of water in a given watershed. So today, I am excited to introduce Jacob, and he is a community organizer and works in innovative ways to move society forward from the outdated ones. So sorry, I just got his bio a second ago, so this is a little off the cuff. He draws from his cultural heritage using traditional ceremonies concept combined with art and activism with each event, rally, and movement, taking us one step closer to a mindful planetary consciousness. So welcome Jacob, and he is going to be talking about his water advocacy work that he does. Jacob, would you like to further introduce yourself?
Yeah, totally. Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Johns, he, him, his pronouns. I'm a community supported organizer with the Backbone Campaign. I'm based out of Spokane, Washington. I'm currently in New Orleans, Louisiana, organizing a large national event for Earth Day in alignment with Joe Biden's climate summit. Really cool stuff. I'm a community supported organizer, which means that I have the fiscal sponsorship of a larger 501c3, which is the Backbone Campaign, that's based out of Vashon Island over by Seattle. I am an independent contractor underneath their nonprofit status, and I utilize the funds that I receive to support myself and to fund a broad variety of intersectional organizing that meets where environmental justice and social justice combine to really amplify the voice in a unified manner. I started doing community support organizing the day after Trump was elected. I have a background in organizing. I was organizing for the Democrats. I worked for single issue ballot initiatives up and down Washington State. I work for political action committees that are doing ballot initiatives for causes that I find worthy. After Trump was elected, I had won my campaign in Washington State, and I signed up with the Backbone Campaign to do community support organizing basically giving me fiscal sponsorship. Before that, I was doing a lot of Dakota Access Pipeline resistance work at Ochedi Sakuin in North Dakota. I was doing a significant amount of organizing for that, and was doing like a GoFundMe platform to bring supplies and do over 6 trips to the front lines in South Dakota and North Dakota. We were doing a lot of stuff back then, trying to protect the water. I think it's important. I think when we talk about water, we talk about like unifying what it means to be a human being here on the planet. We talk about these common denominators that equal us. So I'm Hopi and Annika Milratham from Arizona originally. I'm from there, and we have this concept of what it means to evolve into a planetary consciousness, and one of the ways that we can start preparing for this change and evolution of consciousness is to stop seeing each other as separate and start seeing each other as the same, because we're all human beings within the globe that we call our Mother Earth. The water is life for my culture. It's water is life for everybody, all the mammals and all the fish. Water is life it's the blood of the earth. And when we think about it that way, it really puts a lot of things in perspective for protection and for more importantly, connecting. I think, we all share the same water and we all drink the same, we sweat the same, all of these things. And it really creates a balance when we start thinking about each other within those paradigms.
Well, thank you for that intro, Jacob. I guess I have a couple questions for you to start off. So you were just at line 3, and I would love, could you tell us for those of us who don't know, what is line 3? Why is it important? And what is going on there right now?
Yeah, so I just came back from line 3 maybe 2 weeks ago. We spent some money we raised some funds and brought out a bunch of supplies to the resistance camps. There's 5 resistance camps right now that are doing direct actions against the construction of the line 3 expansion. So line 3 is an existing pipeline that is outdated, and they are basically pumping in tar sand oils, which is coming from Canada. Excuse me. So tar sand oils, to give everyone a concept of what that is, it's not actually oil, it's a particulate, it's tar particulate, and it's the most carbon intensive oil on the planet. It's 35% more carbon intensive than regular gasoline. It's tiny particulates of tar that gets burned like it would be within a petroleum process. There's a vast amounts of tar sands in Canada. The original Enbridge company didn't have enough money to continue to build it. So Canada itself, as the country, bought Enbridge, and so this pipeline that's pumping out Canada's tar sands from the middle of our continent is looking for ways to export that. And Canada bought Enbridge, so Enbridge is actually Canada's pipeline. This pipeline, line 3, runs through.
Jacob, I have to interrupt you real quick. We had a request from the audience to talk a little slower. Is that okay?
Yes, totally.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's a lot of information, so I apologize.
Yeah, and you're passionate, which is you want to talk fast. But yeah, let's just for the sake of the audience, let's if you don't mind talking a little slower, thanks.
So line 3 did exist, and it's an outdated pipeline. All pipelines leak, and so they are trying to go back through and rebuild the line 3. The line 3 is not going to be the same. It's going to expand to over 100,000 more gallons of this crude tar sand oil particulate slush through northern Minnesota. It crosses 4 reservations. It's Red Lake, Leech Lake, White Earth, and Leech Lake. Did I say Leech Lake?
You said that one twice.
Yeah, well, my tribes are from Arizona, so forgive me for that. But it crosses four reservations, and when we talk about pipelines coming through our lands, it's difficult because a lot of people who are logical or conscious or educated understand the impacts of this environmental disaster waiting to happen. And it seems to be a pattern that communities of color are targeted when it comes to these fossil fuel infrastructure projects. When we talk about environmental racism, this is a clear example of what that is. You know, when you have rural communities who are uh, not as wealthy as others, they are often targeted by large corporations, offering jobs, offering money, offering some sort of monetary way to soften the environmental impacts of what that company is doing in the area. And when we talk about targeting communities of color, this pipeline goes through a lot of sacred land to those people. And those people did not all just give away this land. This is unceded territory that they hold sacred all throughout northern Minnesota, and all those tribes, all the Anishinaabe, they all hold those spaces very sacred. And when we talk about tearing up that land and clear cutting the forest, it's like an attack on the person. It's an attack on the spirit. It's an attack on the soul. So this line 3 is over 50% built. There is strong resistance from the people who live there. Fond du Lac Reservation, the one I didn't mention, their tribal communities, their tribal council that has approved the pipeline. But just as we were living underneath Trump for 4 years, as Americans, we didn't all agree with Trump's policies and all of the things that were coming from their administration. This is the same type of thing that's happening there. So there's some tension, I think, from outsiders and from non-Indigenous folks to participate in this resistance because of that official statement coming from one administration. But as we look at the impacts of what this particular pipeline would do, it's basically like starting 50 new coal power plants across the planet. And as we're past the tipping point now, this is just adding gas to a fire. And so, you know, logically, as human beings and as American citizens, we can't allow this foreign oil company to tear through our vulnerable communities and put them at risk for the environmental disasters that are just waiting to happen in order to expedite the increase of our temperature globally. This is a global issue, in my opinion. The water itself is at danger. It crosses over the headwaters of the Mississippi. And if for all of those who know geography, the Mississippi feeds a lot of America further downstream. I'm here in New Orleans currently, where the Mississippi flows out into the ocean. And imagine from all the way in northern Minnesota, if there was a spill or a contamination or a breakage, which is bound to happen with all pipelines, because all pipelines break. This is a national emergency that we should be paying attention to. So I think it's really important for us now to be focusing our thoughts and our actions and our energy at supporting those people resisting the occupation of this foreign oil company who's destroying the environment in northern Minnesota.
Thank you, Jacob. So I have a couple questions. One is, I know you were at line 3 recently, so I'd like to hear about what were the actions that were happening on line 3, on and around line 3, and what was the resistance coming from the authorities from those actions? I guess I'll ask that one first, and then I'll get to my next question.
Yeah, I mean, when we were doing the DAPL stuff, when we were doing no DAPL stuff, you know, so these large corporations will target these rural communities that don't have jobs, you know, and they offer these jobs. Whenever, you know, we do anything environmentally, there's always like these pro-job guys. Well, this is going to give us jobs, and that's all that matters. You know, if you've ever been to an environmental impact statement hearing, all you hear the opposition is like jobs, 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 jobs. And so these corporations target rural communities and low income counties and cities, whatever it may be. And they become company towns. They become, you know, bought and sold by the company, aka corporations. In northern Minnesota, Enbridge is paying the overtime of law enforcement officers who are out there monitoring, surveilling all of the protesters and activists who are doing all this stuff. The GNU Connect Collective specifically, we went to go drop off some supplies, and the police are right there, and they follow everybody. They're checking everybody's license plate. They're pulling people over for no reason. They're getting them looking for anything to get these people. And when we talk about what fascism is, if what fascism means, Mussolini, his definition of fascism was the marriage of corporations and the state. And when we have corporations paying the overtime of law enforcement officers, what do we have? And so when we think about it under those circumstances, it's kind of a scary thing that we're living in this world where these corporations are paying to destroy and harm the water that we all share. There's continuous nonviolent direct actions taking place, a lot of lockdowns, a lot of stuff taking place. When I was there 2 weeks ago, everything was still fairly frozen, especially when they were planning to drill in the Red Lake underneath the Mississippi. The ground was too frozen and squishy to drill properly underneath the Mississippi. And so they had stopped, put a halt on all construction as far as like drilling and pipeline laying, but they still continue construction on the pump stations that would be pushing pressurizing the particulate through the pipelines. Personally, I organized, I did a lot of digital graphics that we did large projection mapping onto the state capitol in Minnesota. And we had got some comrades to come down from Fond du Lac, and we brought in a teepee and erected a teepee and did a blessing at the state capitol, which is fairly radical for Minnesota. In Washington State, we'll put teepees up anywhere. Like we'll put a teepee up in front of Chase Bank, whatever. But we talk about this as like being in prayer, right? Like we want to be in prayer. Like we're here to protect the water. We're here to protect each other. We're here to protect the future of all on the planet. And when we think about it in those contexts, you erase all your fear. You know what's right because you're walking at one with the Creator. You're walking at one with each other. You're walking at one with the universe. And so as we did this action, it was fairly large. We also have some large pipelines, these large inflatable pipelines, thanks to the Backbone campaign that we brought through. I did some large paintings that we brought up and put through. We brought out a lot of stuff. We raised over $7,000 in 2 weeks to bring out supplies and materials to the resistance camps, all 5 resistance camps in northern Minnesota. And we finished with our large action at the state capitol.
Wow, that's so many tactics right there on line 3. One thing I would like to hear a bit about, because people at this Ecumenical Advocacy Days conference are calling in from actually all across the world, quite a few in the US, but what can people do to be to stand in solidarity, to be a co-conspirator with the push against line 3, even if they can't make it to Minnesota? But I mean, the fight for clean water is truly everywhere throughout the United States, especially in Black and Brown communities. So I guess my question is, specifically, what have you seen that is helpful from faith communities? Because people calling in from this conference are from faith communities. What have you seen that's helpful in a solidarity sense?
Yeah, I think financial contributions are always very helpful, especially when they're sent to the right people, sent to the right organizations. A lot of nonprofit groups kind of want to stay away from a lot of the direct actions just because of their nonprofit status. And so when you give money to a nonprofit organization, they're not as they're saying, we're not a direct action type of group. We're not this, we're not that, we'll help in certain ways. But those ways aren't really effective, in my opinion. Number 2 is just come out and support. That's one of the things that is really lacking. It's an Indigenous woman-led resistance up there in northern Minnesota. and they need bodies on the line. You know, they need people to come through. You can check out the Water Protector Welcome Center, and they will give you welcomewaterprotectors.com here. And they have basically, if you've never been, you've never gone, you don't know what nonviolent direct action is, you don't know what protesting is, they can come in and they can train you and school you up and put you in a place that you feel comfortable at any level. And I think it's really important. You know, it's a life changer. When I first went to to fight the Dakota Access Pipeline, they let the dogs loose on us, and they were biting people and all this stuff. We only reason that we had gone out there to try to stop them from constructing was that there was 27 graves that were built, that were buried in the path of the construction of the pipeline. And when they had a court injunction to stop, they started to bulldoze those graves. And those graves were of women and children that were killed by the American government when they were stealing the land from those people. And where those women and children fell, they buried them. And this construction company was bulldozing these graves in order to put in a pipeline. And then when we went to stop them, they let the dogs loose on us. You know, that violence, I think, really escalated a lot of stuff. You can check out the Democracy Now! Video that went off on it. And, you know, when we think about violence against people who are trying to do good things, what we really need is solidarity. We need folks to be there. And if you can't be there in person, right, which we all don't have the ability to just get up and go to northern Minnesota and plug in and lock down to a machine, you know, organizing solidarity actions in your own communities is very important. When we talk about defunding people, when we talk about defunding these banks that are bankrolling these large corporations, you know, targeting them and forcing them, doing withdrawals, moving your money from one bank to another. When we were doing Dakota Access Pipeline, there was a divestment campaign where people were taking money from Wells Fargo and from Chase Bank and other large banks, effectively speaking from your money. You know, that this is something that you can do. When we think about it in those ways, there's a lot of stuff that you can do from your own communities. And when you talk about a larger movement, it really brings up a lot of stuff that's happening locally, and you can connect those two things because nothing is separate from each other. We talk about our waters being poisoned. Our waters have been being poisoned since the beginning of America. And when we think about it in those terms, that these things are not separate from each other, then it gives us power, and it gives power to those that stand in solidarity with us.
Wow, thank you, Jacob. And thank you for dropping that link for Welcome Water Protectors. I think that's such a great resource, and I hope those on this call are able to check it out and get trained. And that can be a great way to plug in as well. And, you know, maybe like Jacob said, maybe you can't make it out to a site, but you can do a local action and get involved at different levels, because there are different levels of involvement and different comfort and different safety levels as well, for depending on who you are and how authorities will treat you. So all that is important to learn beforehand. So thank you for dropping that link. And feel free also, Jacob, to drop any other links in the chat, as that would be that you encourage these us attendees to plug into. I really liked how you said about like everything being interconnected, because even like the exercise with the watershed, you'll see when you go onto that watershed website, the watershed you're on is just part of a bigger watershed and a bigger watershed and a bigger watershed. So there's nothing is separate. As some say, like we're all downstream from somewhere. So things to think about. Okay, so let's see. A few other questions I have for you, Jacob, is what have you seen as, actually, I'm going to rephrase that. Are you familiar with the 30 by 30 campaign to protect 30%? Okay, so there's a national campaign to protect 30% of US public land and water and ocean, like freshwater and ocean, by 2030. My question is, what land, how do you recommend prioritizing what land is protected? Because under the current plan of 30 by 30, there is not language for we need to protect this. Like, for example, line 3 needs to be designated because that's under attack. There isn't really like justice oriented language within 30 by 30. It is pretty much conservation. But what I would like to hear is how could, by protecting land and water, could we protect our watersheds? So that was a bit of a convoluted question, but what do we prioritize with protecting 30% by 2030?
Yeah, so recently in Washington State, we worked on a campaign to get free and informed prior consent for Indigenous people in Washington State. So there's like 29 tribes, I think, in Washington State. But the free and informed prior consent was, it came from the United Nations Indigenous Peoples Caucus. And this was something that was out of that. And Obama was going to sign this FPIC, this free and informed prior consent, to give power over to Indigenous folks when it came to dirty infrastructure projects and fossil fuel projects that are coming through their land, and whether or not they had actual claim to it, legal claim to it now. If they had traditional claim to this as being a sacred space, then they could say, hey, listen, that mountain is protected by ours. And so instead of adopting that when Obama was in office, he let Dakota Access Pipeline happen, right? So when we talk about this free and informed prior consent, in Canada they have something too. It's similar to that, where that we have these people. When we talk about Indigenous landholders and Indigenous stuff, when we talk about like untouched land, globally, not just in America, but globally, the untouched environmental areas are the ones that are in the care of Indigenous people. And so, when we talk about like the original caretakers and this stuff, that I would say to consult the local Indigenous knowledge, because a lot of those people have holding on to the truths, and they need help, and they need power, and they need help from a lot of religious groups to join them in prayer and to join them in this way that is unifying. When we talk about prioritizing stuff, it's not up to us. I'm here in New Orleans. I'm not from here, and so I ask the local Indigenous people what they consider would be a priority. I live in Washington State, and I'm not from there, so I ask the local Indigenous people what is a priority. And so I would suggest the same. I would suggest the exact same thing, that we ask specifically and be brave enough and bold enough to go and come, even as a person of faith and from a religious perspective, to enter into dialogue with the Indigenous groups in your area and say, listen, we're here, we have the energy, what can we do to help support that which you're already working on?
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, so you can, and if you haven't already, make sure to find the native land where you are living, and then go from there to see what are those demands, what are those priorities of the native people in your area. So that's one way to get there. Yeah, thank you, Jacob. These are great ways to plug in. I'm gonna invite people to start putting questions either in the Q&A. Do we have a Q? We don't have a Q&A function in the feel free to start putting questions for Jacob in the chat, and I will kind of read them out as we can fit them in with our discussion. So I guess my question is, Jacob, is what you're doing right now in New Orleans, is there a water ask, a water demand with that right now?
Yeah, so I'm currently, I'm a part of the Power Shift Network, which is a youth climate advocacy network of over 90 youth-led climate movements across the nation. And we are standing in solidarity with the Gulf Coast Week of Action. The Gulf Coast Demands, which is a coalition of people that are working on protecting the water. There's a lot of petrochemical stuff that's happening down here in the Gulf South, from Texas all the way to Florida. That's really rich in historically in oil and gas reserves. The populations around the area have been suffering for years. They call it now Cancer Alley. Has anybody heard of the term Cancer Alley? Yeah, okay, I see one hand, two, three. So Cancer Alley is what we are, and that cancer is based, thank you, Holly. I see it is all stemming from this petrochemical industry that has been normalized down here. For years and years and years, oil companies have been allowed to come in and destroy a lot of these Everglades and the bayous and all of the stuff. Yes, Cancer Alley is very, very known. And so these people are now suffering from the ramifications of that. When we think about nuclear fallout, right? We talk about nuclear fallout, and everybody's conscious of it. Like, you don't want to go to Chernobyl, right? Like Nagasaki might not be the best place to hang out, right? We talk about this, and we're conscious of this. But that same concept is happening when we talk about, fracking. We talk about petrochemical stuff. We talk about environmental disasters and oil spills. All of this stuff, it still resonates and it still sticks by, and it still has an effect on all living beings from that devastation. So this, what's happening down here in the Gulf South is that we're trying to uplift the voices. There's 17 actions. I'm the action coordinator for this Power Shift event, this Earth Day action. We have, actually it's 18 events that are happening all around the country, and there's 2 internationally. There's one in Zimbabwe and one in San Cristobal, Spain. There's one, two in-person direct actions happening. There's one in DC that are going to take the petitions from people, ordinary people and organizational sign-ons to DC, and we'll deliver them in the morning of Earth Day that coincides with Joe Biden's climate conference. For those of you who don't know, we've rejoined the Paris Agreement. And this is I dropped the petition in the chat, so feel free to sign on to it. You can see what it is. That the petition, the Gulf Coast Week of Action and demands are from its people. Basically, it's stopping the export of oil. It's a big deal for us because when we stop the export of oil, we stop the infrastructure projects that come through and devastate our country. But since the United Nations, or since the U.S. has rejoined the Paris Agreement, there's a framework within the United Nations called the Conference of the Parties, where countries come together and they have a plan, and this plan comes through and they negotiate on how they're going to stay beneath 1.5 degrees Celsius. That plan itself has not been finalized, and it's going to be dropping on Earth Day during Biden's climate summit. And this petition is urging Joe Biden to make amendments to meet the demands from the Gulf South. There's also the youth climate action, the youth climate demands, which I will drop in here. You can see that a lot of the stuff that we want is like actual change. We don't want to see lip service, which we've been seeing from administration after administration after administration. Like we're not at a point now where we can play around and pretend that we've only got 10 years. How many times do we say that? Everybody said, oh, we only got 10 more years. They've been saying that for a long time. Like, the truth is that the time is now. And if we don't see action and we don't see solidarity, that all these things are linked together, like, we're not going to have a planet for each other. And we're not going to have a planet for our children. We're not going to have a planet for our grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren and so on. And when you think about it like that those future generations are really counting on you to take action and just do something now. So your great-great-grandkids can't say to you, what did you do to stop this? You can say, I did these things. I did these things and I was trying. And it wasn't all of us. We were all in this together. So please take some time to fill out the petitions. They're going to be delivered on Earth Day in DC to the State Department in a New Orleans style fashion. And then we're going to be doing some other stuff and simulcasting around the country and internationally for some really cool Earth Day stuff to raise awareness globally for these demands that we can no longer stand by and let capitalism destroy the environment.
Yes, and if you're going to be in DC, or if you are in the DC area on Earth Day, come through. I'll be there and we can say hi and deliver the petition together. So make sure to pay attention to the chat, as Jacob is dropping some great links in there of the petitions and of other other resources. So we do have a question from Reverend Rebecca Barnes, and her question is, Jacob, can you say more about the connected oppressions between racism and colonialism of Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities in this country, and the commodification and desecration of water?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Look at Flint, Michigan. You know, we have all these fracking things happening. All the stuff, we have all this international aid going on, but the fracking that happened in Flint, Michigan has contaminated the groundwater, and they are still suffering from that. This is poisoning. This is in our soil. And, you know, it doesn't seem like anybody cares, because the amount of colored people, BIPOC folks that are living in Flint, Michigan outseeds the other people. Sorry, I got the phone stringing. When we talk about it under that, it's like, you know, this is happening right now. Like, this has been happening for a long time. During World War II. So let's just take a step back and start talking about the foundation, right? We talk about water. Putting dams in the river is cultural genocide. I'm Amalka Merotam. I'm from Arizona. I'm Gila River Pima. And my people grew up we lived in the Phoenix area, the entire Valley of the Sun. There was rivers. There was a river coming down through Salt River. There was a Gila River. There was all these rivers. The Phoenix area was a lush place. And what happened is that they damned the rivers up to provide electricity to the city of Phoenix. And once they dammed those rivers, there was no more water. We couldn't eat. We couldn't do all of these things. We couldn't farm, and we were farmers. We think about putting dams in the rivers. They put dams in northeastern Washington, and the salmon can't come home. Those indigenous people themselves had survived on the salmon and provided all these different things to happen. And it's cultural genocide, clearly, just from dams. When we talk about green energy, everybody's hyping up these dams, and it's like, no, that's systematic racism. When we talk about putting a dam in there and that being green energy, that's perpetuation of systematic racism. And this environmental green energy is actually committing genocide on the indigenous people, and it's been happening for a long, long time. You know, there's so many examples of all of this. We talk about uranium mining. When we were doing the nuclear rush, you know, it was only the indigenous reservations that were targeted and mined for uranium. And if you look at specifically the tribes that ran and fought against the tribes that fought against the American government, those reservations specifically were targeted for open pit uranium mining. If you look at Pine Ridge Reservation, which was very, very aggressive against and winning, you know, think about Custer, all this Pine Ridge Reservation and the Lakota Nation, they have open pit uranium minings on them. Look at Navajo Reservation, Spokane Reservation, Hopi Reservation, you know, Pine Ridge, all these things, they're open pit. And then what happens is the government comes in with this capitalist mindset, and they mine for this poison that they bring up, they take what they need, and they leave the disasters alone. You know, this is not a new thing, but we think about it in those current contexts of Flint, Michigan, you know, and if you even look at Newark, New Jersey, with the lead poisoning, they have, you know, this perpetuation of all of these things that like nobody cares. If it's not in my neighborhood, it's not affecting me and my family, then it doesn't matter. And there's such a weird separation between races and cultures and all of this outside of the spectrum, then it just becomes, you know, this perpetuation. And once we realize that and wake up to it, then we can do something about it. And that's the power, I think, is it's knowledge. It's that we become aware of these things and understand this. And we don't have guilt about them. We don't narrow it down and talk to our progressive friends and complain and whine, oh, did you hear about what's happening over there? No, we take that knowledge and we do something about it. We become active. And that's what I'm encouraging you all to do, to take the time to look at what's happened in your own communities, and not feel guilty about it just as being a white person, but more importantly, take that knowledge and say, no, we can be the person, we can be the people, we can be the group that stands in solidarity and fixes and remedies this situation for the future of humanity.
Wow, beautifully put. And I wanted to share with you, Jacob, that the attendees of Ecumenical Advocacy Days are actually going to be doing a hill visit a virtual Capitol Hill visit on the climate crisis soon, Wednesday, tomorrow. And so these are some great points to be thinking about as us attendees go into these Hill visits of these case studies that are so true. And maybe they're not happening in our backyard, but they're happening, and that's what matters. If we are instructed to love our neighbor, everyone is our neighbor. Everywhere is our backyard. So we need to be in solidarity regardless of where this is happening. Another thing I wanted to mention, just like kind of in addition to what you are talking about, Jacob, is how even when it comes to, like, you mentioned Flint, Michigan, and so there is still a crisis, and you know who got their pipes fixed first? It was the wealthy white community within Flint, and yeah, so it was the wealthy white community. It wasn't the Black and Latino communities there. And so even when there's a problem, even when it's acknowledged, like, there's so much farther to go, and there is still such racism involved in when coming to solving the problem. So that's something to think about as well. So Holly has a question. It's, do you recommend the movie The Condor and the Eagle? I know I do. I don't know if you've seen that movie, Jacob, but I can give the recommendation, definitely. Okay, so we just have a couple of minutes left. We're going to be wrapping up in just around 7:50. So if you 7:50 Eastern time. So if you have any more questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat, and I'll ask them to Jacob. But I guess as we kind of round this out, do you have any closing words for us, Jacob? And I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. I mentioned this at the top, but actually Jacob agreed to do this webinar 10 minutes before it started because the original speaker fell through. And so I knew Jacob was active in water access and wanted him. I knew that you guys would all want to hear from him too. So I'm so grateful he's here. And thank you for doing it seriously, just on a whim. I really appreciate it. So yeah, is there anything that you want to close us out with?
Yeah, provide and contribute. I mean, $10, $20. Look for ways that you contribute monthly to a lot of folks. There's a lot of people that are doing really important work that need help and need support so that this work can get done. I'm just one of thousands of people that are out there doing this type of work and working within the grace of the universe in order to pay their bills and also do the organizing that needs to be done so that we can see effective changes nationally that you can contribute to financially, and any amount of money is really helpful and benefits. And then your money can speak. As we live within this capitalistic system, our money speaks. And $20 a month is nothing to some people, but $20 a month to others is a lot, especially when we're doing this type of work. So think about giving from your heart, and more importantly, think about giving from your wallet to a lot of folks that need the assistance to continue to do this type of work.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. And we did have a question. Jacob's full name is Jacob Johns. Do you want to, Jacob did post a couple of links in the chat of where to find him, but Jacob, if there's any other places where you want to be found, could you link them in the chat so that people can keep up with your great work and plug in?
Yeah, totally. Here is a link to my webpage. You can see all the stuff. It's not very dated, but I also dropped in the Facebook link where you can see a lot of the stuff of current projects and past projects that I do videos of to really help people grasp the concept of what took place and how this happened. I do a lot of live streams and a lot of organizing work around a lot of intersectional stuff. Please follow the page, and if you can, make a donation, become a monthly donor to me personally, and I can hook it up and show you all the cool stuff, and we can really get some stuff done. So thank you all so much for sitting here and listening to me and standing in solidarity, or sitting down in front of Zoom in solidarity.
Wow. Well, thank you, Jacob. And I think I know this got me excited for our visits on Wednesday, and even getting even more examples of how the climate crisis is hurting people, and particularly communities of color and Native nations. So, and I think that I can speak for a lot of us and say that we are excited for our visits and ready to make some changes and plug in. So thank you, Jacob, and thank you all for coming. We're going to go ahead and wrap up now, but have a great rest of your conference, everyone. Bye.
Bye.